The College Football Playoff Committee's initial top 25 just got dropped a moment ago, and I am going to take you through it. Who got overrated, who got underrated, and who got straight up disrespected. That'll all be tackled today. And with the intro out of the way, I'd like to say hello and welcome to the JSI Studio. I'm your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're going to be breaking down the College Football Playoffs top 25. So the first five were at 25, Air Force; at 24, Tulane; at 23, Kansas State; at 22, Oklahoma State; and at 21, Kansas. So what we've got here are the two best group of five teams that have both been disrespected with their rankings. Air Force way more than Tulane. Tulane, I think, being in 25 to 20 is relatively fair. I mean, their only loss is to a top 10 ranked Ole Miss, but Air Force is undefeated, and they've beaten quality teams too. They've beaten two of the best group of five teams so far this year. I don't particularly agree with them being ranked below Tulane, and I think they're probably better than, I think, all three of the Big 12 teams here. Kansas can score on anybody, so that'd be a tough matchup for them, but Air Force would still have a really good chance to win that game. Outside of that, Kansas State and Kansas and Oklahoma State, three ranked Big 12 teams right down here at the bottom. I think the Big 12 is a little bit better than people have been giving them credit for so far this year. But in order for the Big 12 to make the playoffs, like pretty close to 100%, they're going to have to hope that Texas wins out. Because I think a 11-1 Ohio State, if they were to lose to Michigan, would get in over a 12-1 Oklahoma, and I think a 12-1 Georgia would also get in over a 12-1 Oklahoma team who wins the Big 12. So I think their playoff hopes rest squarely on the shoulders of Texas. And even then, if it works out, there's a 13-0 Pac-12 and a 13-0 ACC team, I think the Big 12 is the odd team out, even if Texas ends up winning out. But having these potentially ranked matchups here, now Texas and Oklahoma have both played Kansas, and I think Oklahoma has to play Oklahoma State, and Texas is playing Kansas State this year. So I think this being a ranked matchup here is going to help the Big 12 quite a bit. I think that's really the reason why we saw these teams get ranked and where they got ranked. At number 20, they have USC. At number 19, they have UCLA. At number 18, they have Utah. At 17, they have Tennessee. At 16, they have Oregon State. So you've got four Pac-12 teams ranked right here, and then Tennessee, who's in the SEC. But these are good football teams. All of them, except for one. Do you guys remember that old Sesame Street song? I don't know if I'm the only one that watched Sesame Street when I was a kid, but that old Sesame Street thing where they'd throw like three things up there and one of them would be a different color, and then they'd go like, one of these things doesn't belong here, one of these things is not like the others. Well, that's USC on this fucking list. They have no business being ranked. They are ranked because they are a national brand. USC is going 8-4. I don't know how to tell people this. USC is going 8-4. Well, I mean, hell, they might even lose to UCLA. They might go 7-5. They're not a good football team. They're just not. And I don't get why they're ranked. They're not a good football team. And there are more teams worthy of being ranked than USC. So I don't understand that decision at all. UCLA at 19, I'm okay with it. I don't think UCLA is all that great either, but it is what it is. Utah at 18, I'm cool with that. Tennessee at 17, I'm good with that. Oregon State lost a tough game this past week, but they're a really, really good team that has a chance to play spoiler for Oregon at the end of this year. And this is a group of teams that really feel like, to me, the exception of USC, because there's no real chance of them doing anything. But if Oregon State played in the Big 12 or the ACC, I think there's a serious chance they would be the best team in those divisions. You know, you look at Texas and Florida State and those two respective conferences, but I think they'd have a good chance to win those games, specifically Florida State, because Oregon State's just actually a bad matchup against Florida State. But it is what it is. And Oregon State is a really, really good team. Tennessee is solid. Again, probably going 9-3. Hope you get the bowl game, get to 10 wins. But Josh Heupel's putting himself together a program right there. Utah already is a program. UCLA under Chip Kelly, I think, is going to be a program, assuming they can find themselves a quarterback. Maybe Dante Moore takes the leap who knows? USC's dead in the water. So this is the group that is like maybe one or two pieces away with the exception of USC. I think if Oregon State had a little bit more explosive talent at the wide receiver positions, I think they'd probably be a real contender in the Pac-12. I think if Tennessee had a better quarterback, I think they'd be contending in the SEC potentially. I think if Utah had a better quarterback, they'd maybe be straight up the best team in the Pac-12 with the way that defense and the run game works. So, yeah, same with UCLA, if I'm being honest with you. So, very similar teams, UCLA and Utah, the U team. Nevertheless, the next group of teams at number 15, Notre Dame, at number 14, LSU, at number 13, Louisville, at number 12, Missouri, and at number 11, Penn State. These are the group of teams where you're like, okay, if one thing changed, they'd be legit playoff contenders. Right now, these teams are outside looking in type of people. Penn State needs a lot to happen for them to win the Big Ten East. Missouri basically just has to win out, but that's not very likely in my opinion. Same with Louisville, but also probably not very likely in my opinion. LSU needs a crap ton to happen, and Notre Dame with no conference championship game is not going to make the playoffs. All of these teams are one or two plays away from being serious contenders, but aren't. You know, if you look at Missouri, if you can make one defensive stop against LSU, you can win that game. You look at Louisville, you know, if you don't get hung over from beating the daylight out of Notre Dame, then, you know, you're undefeated and probably ranked in the top 10. I think probably at 10, in my opinion. If you look at LSU, you know, you just need the one or two more plays against Ole Miss. You weren't beating Florida State, but that shouldn't have been a killer for you. It turns out that it might have been because you had to play with a margin of 0. So these are all teams that were close, but ultimately they are not going to get the cigar. So these are a set of teams that are on the outside looking in of the college football playoff race, but they are potentially New Year's 6 bowl contenders for the 4 that are not part of the college football playoff scenarios and all of that. These are the teams that are going to be contending for the chance to play in those games, which are still big games. And if you look at, you know, Penn State or Louisville/Missouri, you know, if you look at this, your season really kind of at this point comes down to maybe you have one game on the schedule where like, oh, you need to win that game. But really it's going to be if you can get to a New Year's 6 bowl game and win. That's going to be what defines this season for you. I think if Penn State ends up 11-2 just like last year, I think you're looking at this team, you're looking at what's coming back next year, you're thinking, okay, maybe if we can have more trust in Drew Allar sooner on in the season, then maybe we can end up being really, really good next year. Maybe next year can be the team that breaks through. With Missouri, you're like, okay, we've got a really, really good wide receiver. We've got a good offense. Can we get some defensive help, specifically in the secondary? If we can't do that, then this year might be it, but let's go ahead and enjoy the ride. Louisville under Jeff Brom, I do not expect to be going anywhere anytime soon. LSU under Brian Kelly, I think, is going to get it figured out. And I do also believe in Notre Dame under Marcus Williams. Now we're getting into the bread and butter here with the top 10. At number 10, they have Ole Miss. At number 9, they have Oklahoma. At number 8, they have Alabama. At number 7, they have Texas. And at number 6, they have Oregon. And this is about what I had. I think I might have had Ole Miss and Oklahoma swapped. But then I think this is pretty close to what I had. These are all for real playoff contenders. Ole Miss just needs to survive this week. They get Georgia in Athens. They're going to need to bring it if they want to win that game. I do not trust Lane Kiffin to do so, but that's a conversation for a later point in time. Ole Miss is a good team. I mean, they finally gotten the running game going these past 2 weeks. Quinson Judkins looks healthy again, so that's good for them. That dramatically increases their chance of beating anybody with him on the field. Oklahoma at number 9, I'm okay with it. I do think the Oklahoma slander has gone a little bit far. This is still a very, very good football team with a bright future under Brett Venerables. I just don't think they're real this year. At number 8, you've got Alabama, and Alabama really feels like a team that is a quarterback away from being like clear-cut national championship contenders. Right now, they're on the outside looking in because of Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe has been great when he's throwing the ball deep, and these past few weeks he's actually kind of shown an ability to work the intermediate game a little bit, but he's just not consistent, and that is a killer when you also don't have a very consistent defense either. Texas at 7, they are a team that I think probably of all of these teams ranked here have the highest ceiling. If Quinn Ewers can get going and he can hit Xavier Worthy on some deep shots, and A.D. Mitchell can go up and get one, then Sanders can start getting open over the middle. They get the run game going. The defense gets to tee off and rush the passer, which they're very good at. Texas is probably the team here in this group of 5 teams that has the highest ceiling, and I think probably the best chance at a national title. Oregon at 6, I think, is the team of these group of 5 here that has the highest floor. Not the highest ceiling, but the highest floor. Bucky Irving is utterly phenomenal. He's probably going to win my version of the Doak Walker. Bo Nix has been great. He finally has started to show up in big games. The defense is very much improved from last year, and it was already a solid group last year. It's a great group this year. They're great on offense, and they're great on defense. So they're like a tier below elite on both sides of the ball, which maybe makes them like one of the 3 best teams in football. But my question that I have with Oregon is, when the shit hits the fan, who do they go to? What is their bread and butter? What is their you can't stop this even though you know it's coming type of play or player? And I don't particularly think that they have that right now, which does limit the ceiling of that team, in my opinion. Okay, here we go. This is the top 5. This is what everybody came for. If the college football playoff ended today, then Washington would be the first team out, as they are ranked 5. Florida State would be at 4, Michigan at 3, Georgia at 2, and Ohio State at 1. If you watched my video on Monday, you know what I'm going to say about Georgia being ranked number 2. I don't understand how anybody who has watched that team play football cannot say that they are the best team in the country. The past 3 weeks or so, pretty much right after I made that video comparing them to Michigan and said that Michigan would win, like just barely, I think they were just barely a better team. Pretty much after that video, Georgia has been on a different goddamn planet than everybody else. So, yeah, they should be ranked number 1. They have no business not being ranked number 1, in my opinion. In fact, I think they're probably going to be ranked number 1 next week when they beat the pants off of Missouri this week. So I don't particularly get why you didn't just put them at number 1 this week, because they're going to be number 1 next week. I mean, I don't understand it. To me, it's clear as day that Georgia is the best team in college football. I don't think Ohio State is in the top 4 teams in college football. I think they might be 5. But I think in a head-to-head matchup, I think Washington would win that game. In a head-to-head matchup, I think Florida State would beat them. And spoiler alert for my thoughts on the game, but I think Michigan is going to beat Ohio State this year. It's going to be a really close and really tough game, but I do think Michigan is better just because they've been far more consistent passing the football this year. All right, anyway, let's go from the top here down. Washington at 5. They completely control their own destiny. If they lose a game, even if they go 12-1, that opens the door for other teams to get in, including a 1-loss Michigan or Georgia or Ohio State. So if Michigan, Ohio State, they play each other, obviously one of those 2 teams is going to end up 11-1 and missing the college football playoff, likely, unless Washington drops a game. Then I think you could make the case that if Washington were to lose in the Apple Cup to Washington State, then I think you could say that Michigan, if they beat the pants off of Penn State, could potentially get in over them because they were just dominating everybody this year, and Washington had a couple of slip-ups. And I think Ohio State would just straight up make it in over a 12-1 Pac-12 champion Washington team. So I think if Washington is going to make the playoffs, I think they're going to have to go 13-0. I think it's the same story with Florida State because they don't have the teams left on their schedule to warrant being put in ahead of either a 1-loss Georgia, Michigan, or Ohio State. Now, their win over LSU would probably be fairly similar to a potential Michigan win over Penn State. They're both probably going to end the season 10-2 or 9-3, but they're better than that record. They just lost to some teams that are also really, really good. So I think those will both carry quite a bit of water, and the deciding factor in deciding between Michigan and Florida State, both in being ranked 4 versus 3, but also in a potential one-loss teams looking to make the playoffs situation. I think the deciding factor would be that Michigan has not had a hiccup, and Florida State's had a couple with Boston College, and Clemson is not good. So that could potentially be a deciding factor in a scenario where Florida State were to drop a game maybe to Florida in the rivalry game at the end of the year, and then they go on and dominate the ACC championship game the next week. At number 3, Michigan. There's not a whole lot to talk about this team on the field. There's a ton to talk about this team off the field. In fact, I was going to make a whole ass video about it today, but yesterday on Tuesday, there was some new information that was brought to light, and I basically had to rework about a third of the video, so that will come at some point in the future. But for right now, kind of got blindsided by some pretty big news, and we don't particularly know what's going on there, so I'm going to hold off on my analysis and take of the whole Michigan sign stealing sort of thing. But on the field, there's not a whole lot to talk about. On the field this year, if we're talking about who's looked the best, it's been Michigan. So I don't know, but they could be the best team in college football. I don't think they are. I think that's Georgia. I've already said it, but they're a really good team, and we're not going to know jack diddly about them until they play Penn State and Ohio State, and we may not even know jack diddly about them until they go to the playoffs, because I think there's a fairly good chance that they end up 13-0, and Ohio State and Penn State are just kind of fake, so we don't particularly even know if Michigan is going to be good based off of those games. At number 2, we have Georgia. I think Georgia should be number 1. I think without Brock Bowers, Carson Beck still looks like a first-round quarterback, and the wide receiving core has stepped up in a major way, and you still have some very talented tight ends. So I think this is a great team that is getting healthy. You're probably going to get Armanius Mims back at right tackle, and that's going to provide a boost to the offensive line, even though the offensive line has still been one of the 5 best units in the country. But you get a potential first-round pick back, then it's going to help the team be better. The defense, although not at the same level of these past 2 years, certainly with not the same level of NFL talent as these past 2 years, has been perhaps a tad bit disappointing, but they've still been really, really good. They're still undoubtedly a top 10 unit in college football and potentially even a top 5 unit. So I think the defense is okay. They have the best secondary in the country, without a doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt. So they're going to be really, really good. I think there's a very good chance that they manage to three-peat for like the first time in the history of college football. And Ohio State at number 1. I mean, listen, this is a really, really good football team. I'm not going to lie to you. But the offensive line is what is holding this team back. I don't think it's Kyle McCord. I think Kyle McCord is undoubtedly a quarterback that is good enough with that receiving core to win a national championship. The offensive line is not. Maybe the biggest mismatch in all of the big games still yet to come in this college football season is going to be Michigan's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line. They've gotten by off of big plays from Marvin Harrison and Travion Henderson, but with a defense like Michigan, they can probably take away one of those things. They'll probably be able to take away Travion Henderson's big plays running. And if they can do that, then Marvin Harrison off of the play action is not going to be as effective. So I don't really know, but this is still a very, very good team with potentially the best defense in all of college football. Now, I've kind of said before that I think Jim Knowles is going to become Ohio State's version of Don Brown, where you play teams with equal talent and then all of a sudden you're giving up 50 points. And I still kind of believe that, but I think it has more to do with if you were to get to the playoff and play a team like Georgia, I think that they would dominate you. I think there's a very good chance you'll be able to handle Michigan's offense. And if you win that game, you can win all of the games. You're ranked number 1. You've got the best resume in college football. You have 2 quality wins, which is not something anybody else can claim right now. So this is a very good football team. The 4 most overranked teams, in my opinion, on the poll Ohio State, I mean, I just talked about how it's a very good football team. The only reason Ohio State is overranked is because they should be number 2, not number 1. But they are overranked, and I just think it's borderline blasphemous to not have Georgia at number 1 right now. USC does not deserve to be ranked. We've already talked about that at length. Notre Dame, I am significantly lower on Notre Dame than the playoff committee. I think I have Notre Dame like 21, so that's like 6 spots of difference. And I'm a little bit lower on Utah than the playoff committee. I think I've got them at like 19, 18, something like that. I don't remember. But Utah, I do think is a tad bit overrated. If they had Cam Rising, I think they would probably be undefeated right now. I mean, with Oregon, the way Oregon played last week, it is what it is. But that team is very, very well coached and very, very tough to beat. But they are a bit overranked, in my opinion. The most underranked teams. Number 1, Georgia. They should be number 1. They're number 2. They're underranked. Air Force was the single most disrespected team that was eligible to be ranked. James Madison was not eligible to be ranked. They're one of the 20 best teams in football, in my opinion. So I don't know why the NCAA has that idiotic rule about elevating and how you can't be bowl eligible for 2 years. I don't get it. It doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. But Air Force is the best group of 5 team, in my opinion. I think they're really tremendously good, and I think they would have a serious chance to beat a team in a New Year's Six Bowl. Louisville, I think, is also a little bit underranked and pretty disrespected. I mean, this is a 1-loss team with a win over Notre Dame and Duke. Those are 2 quality wins, in my opinion. So I don't really get why they're ranked where they are. I think they should probably be a little bit higher, certainly ahead of Penn State, who has no real wins. I mean, West Virginia is okay, but I don't get it. It is what it is. But Louisville, I think, is a little bit underranked. And then Oregon. I've got Oregon ranked number 3. I think they're better than Washington. I think in a neutral site, they're going to avenge that loss. And then I think they're going to end up being the 4 seed playing Georgia and have a potential to get revenge on Georgia for the opening day of 2022. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet telling you his opinion. And that is all that I have for you today. So I'm going to head and ask you to like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagree with me at any point, or if you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.